By the time the pros were getting ready, the heavens had opened and the race had been dropped to 4 laps. These guys were going to leave their waterproofs on to the very last minute. But all caution was thrown to the Dartmoor wind within seconds of the gun as they headed through the first of 4 river crossings per lap. Refreshing when it's hot, but not much fun in these conditions. Paul Lazenby leads the field through, and good news for Tim Gould fans as he's up with the leaders.
David Baker in the lead.
After the first climb, David Baker leads Gary Ford down the main spectator point, the notorious pipeline, with Gould in third. Behind, a number of riders were entertaining the crowd after the rain had made this section even more treacherous. A few minutes later, Caroline Alexander leads the women through the river at the start of their 3 laps, and it was an early bath for Sarah Cartmel. By the top of the pipeline, Caroline had already opened up nearly a minute on the rest of the field, with yet again Canadian Jill Smith leading the chase, ahead of Sally Timmis and Sally Hibbard.
And number 912 in second place. Number 9.
Meanwhile, Deb was trying to get back on terms, having been held up in the river. Picking up the lead men as they head through the bomb holes, David seemed unfazed by the conditions, while Gary, despite his obvious strength, is still looking to improve technically and was a bit more cautious. Rocky Mountain's Paul Dixon, in his second season, had moved up to third. With most of the field taking this section very easily, the race was going to be all about those who would survive, as in these conditions, bike failure is much more likely. At the top of the course on the moors, the riders were getting lashed by the rain, and Gary was stuck to David's wheel. The winner from the first round in Yorkshire, Nick Craig, was beginning to show, having moved ahead of Tim and Barry Clark. What a lovely way to spend a Sunday afternoon. We rejoined the leaders at the far end of the course, and Nick had joined David and Gary up front as they struggled up this short climb. In dry conditions, the strong lads will be riding up this. Whilst back on the moors, Caroline had opened her lead to 1:30 and was already passing the tail end of the men. Behind her, Deb, who won on this course last year, was now back on terms with Jill, and just look at that rain. Heading down towards the end of the lap, David and Nick were gradually opening a gap on Gary, who couldn't stay with them on the technical sections.
Gary, good luck, good stuff.
At the second river crossing on lap 2, Nick Craig was obviously feeling confident enough to put the pressure on and see if he could get away. But David wasn't going to let any air get between them after losing to Nick in the first round. They had opened up a gap of 47 seconds over Gary Ford, who had a tumble and lost his right bar end. He was a further 1:10 ahead of Adrian Timmis and Robin Seymour after Adrian's teammate Barry Clark had punctured on the first lap. Chasing them and a further 40 seconds down was a group led by Chris Young and Fred Salmon, with Tim having dropped back to 8th. He was obviously still not right, but far better than his 24th in Yorkshire. At the top of the moor, and we're with Mudcam as David once again takes on the pace. And now it's Nick's turn to try and stay with it. Doesn't the weather sound lovely? Gary through in third, chased by Mudcam, and you can see how he's not as smooth as the first two, and in these conditions that means losing time and using energy. Adrian had opened a slight gap over Robin on the climb. Robin, who's from Ireland, is in his first season over here and obviously goes well on the technical stuff. Behind, the chasing group was sticking together, no doubt trying to get some protection from the wind. Picking up the women's race on lap 2 at the tabletop, and Caroline has steadily increased her lead. Following her great rise in the World Cup, she seems almost unbeatable in Britain. And Deb, who as always is good on technical courses, just couldn't seem to reel her in. Caroline had opened a gap of 2.5 minutes over Deb, who was a further 2 minutes ahead of the rest of the field. As the men approached the end of their second lap, the seesawing of first place continued between Nick and David. But Nick's crash cost him 40 seconds due to a jammed chain, and that let David get away, and meant that Gary was almost back in touch. Behind him, the race was beginning to stretch out, as Adrian put 30 seconds into Robin Seymour. There was also a major change up front in the women's race, with Caroline having to drop out when her front mech broke, which means after 3 attempts, Caroline has failed to finish a race at Newnham. Last year, she was carted off in an ambulance after a crash. Behind Deb, Sally Timmis, who's more familiar with the smooth boards of the track than this sort of stuff, had moved into second, ahead of Jill, while Sian Roberts, still suffering from an injured ankle, was in fourth. And picking up Deb heading up to the bomb holes on her final lap, she knew that just keeping it steady would ensure her a victory.
I'm quite optimistic. I've had a good winter, so and I feel fitter now than I normally do this time of year, so that's quite a good sign. But equally, the elite class is much stronger again this year. There's a lot of new faces, and so you never quite know what everybody else has been up to.
What are your aims then?
I'd like to definitely go better than I did last year. I got third overall. I'd like to get close to Caroline, and I'd like to get second overall. And if things went well, then I'll always be going for first.
But in second, a tiring Sally would have to be wary of a strong finishing Sian Roberts. Behind them, the men were starting their fourth and final lap, with David now comfortably in the lead ahead of Gary, who had moved back up to second. David was making a final surge to ensure that there was no last-minute challenges to his lead. With Nick Craig now suffering from general fatigue, as well as a bang on the knee, dropping to third. Gary's in only his second season of mountain biking, having moved across from riding the road last year. And this will be his best British result, showing that he can perform at home as well as abroad. Further down, Adrian was safe in fourth, but it was now Chris Young who had moved up to fifth. Fred was having another steady riding sixth, with Robin Seymour slowly dropping back and now in seventh. And Fred never misses an opportunity to advertise his bar ends. With the course cutting up badly in the rain, David opts for a run down here, which shows his greater experience over the unfortunate Gary.
How many times?
It's not very often that you see mountain bikers run downhill, and when these boys do it, you know there's a reason. In Nick's case, it's faster. So the round 2 victory goes to Deb, and she'll be pleased to get out of the rain. And like Deb, David performs a repeat of his win here last year. Sian did her usual last lap blast and moved into second, teaching Sally the first rule of women's mountain biking: never forget Sian on the last lap. And an almost unrecognisable Gary Ford comes in second for his best ever 7-Up BMBF result. So were Deb's pre-season aims coming true?
I can't quite believe it, actually. I just sort of went off at my own pace and got into a real battle with Jill Smith for a while. And I caught her and Sally Timmis, they were together. And I just sort of went past them, and Jill came with me, and Sally went off the back. And then I just sort of settled down to my pace and tried to ride as smooth as I could. I just kept thinking, ride smooth, you know, because it's all about how well you ride, not so much how fast you ride.
You seemed to have a problem on the first lap, didn't you, after the start?
Yeah, somebody fell off right in the middle of the river. I mean, I hope they're all right. It was one hell of a fall. And I had a bit of a tussle on the climb with Sally Timmis. I wanted one line and she wanted the same line, and I lost, so...
That was tough. But I'm pleased to come through with second, because on the first lap I snapped my handlebars, and to be honest I was that far from getting off, you know, because it seems stupid but I couldn't balance because of having a bar end on one side and not on the other. I was all over the show. But then I did the second lap and got going again and caught Nicky at the belt and sort of got going. So
I had a crash with 2 laps to go, knocked me out of my stride a bit. Just over there I was with David, that's when he got the gap. But I suffered a bit. Glad to hang on to third on the last lap. Survival.
I attacked like early on and sort of like forced the pace early on. I took the bull by the horns and really gave it some from the gun, really.
You went away with Nicky Craig. What happened to Nicky?
Well, it was sort of every time there was a descent he was trying to attack me on the descents, which it was very slippy today, and he just took a small tumble and I got the gap and increased it every lap.
Well, David looks like he's back on his winning ways, but seems to be finding new challenges to his crown wherever he looks. Though for the time being, he has returned to the top of the 7-Up BMBF National Points Series table. Deb's commanding victory will have made all her competitors take notice, and may even give her the belief that she can beat Caroline, who, although lying 4th in the series, is now out of contention, as she will be missing at least 2 races by doing the World Cup circuit. Next week, we'll be looking at mountain biking's other main discipline, downhilling, as the 7-Up British Mountain Bike Federation National Downhill Series gets underway. And we'll see if the likes of Deb Morrell and Jason Shackleton can retain their titles.